By the way, check and take the slides into our view. Here we are.
I even find some small mistakes.
Please?
I even find some small mistakes.
I said I didn't understand you.
I mean, I found some small mistakes in the slide. It's just fine.
Yeah, then just send it to me.
At page 49, you use the circa 200, aber das ist Deutsch.
Ah, yeah. So this we did, the basics we did, the history we did. Did you have a chance to go into the shareholder and stakeholder value?
Yeah.
Hello?
I just have a short click about the whole slide. I don't know how about the others.
So it's slide 33. Ladies, did you have a chance? Hello?
No.
No. No. You didn't have a chance to look at shareholder or stakeholder value? No? Okay. Aisin, did you have a chance to go into this subject?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you say sure. Look, ladies, normally girls are faster, learn more intense, and mostly learn more than boys. This is my experience from the university, etc. Is this in China different?
It depends.
It
depends.
It depends. I always had have in mind that girls are more intense in learning subjects, but yes, everything depends on. So I could tell it about shoulder.
Shareholder just, interested. Shareholder is So someone who have an interest with you, and they want, they also is a part of the a part of the company, and okay. If the company make more profit, the shareholder also get a benefit from that.
What is the difference between a shareholder and a stakeholder? Ladies and Aisin, what is the difference? Any Exactly. And who has an idea about who could be a stakeholder of a company?
Upstream and downstream, or upstream and downstream supplier, maybe.
So the typical stakeholders are groups within or around a company which officially, as Ray said, is represented by the shareholders. And stakeholders are, for example, unions who represent the workers in a company. So they only are going to represent the workers within the company, their rights for special incomes, salaries, etc. But they don't have shares. They are stakeholders, so they have certain certain interests in the company. Of course, also interests in making the company successful, and sometimes have a quite strong influence. So, for example, at Volkswagen, the representative of the workers, the unions, are very strong. They're also sometimes influence the strategy of the company because they have a different view on the company. And they, for example, they urged the leader of the company to go into the electrical engine stuff earlier than the representative of the company actually did. So there was strong input. So another stakeholder could be, for example, the representatives of an industry. So if you have the automotive industry, they have an association, the International Association for the car industry. So yes, everything which is not having a share of a company, but an interest in the company, or a kind of try to influence the company, etc. Yeah. So the point is, why are we actually talking about the shareholder and stakeholder? It's because it is a piece of the the basic which is important for an entrepreneur when he is building up a company. Because when we see the company which is going to build up, from the beginning, after they have built up a prototype of their product, they directly go into a shareholder relationship. And shareholder not only means a share which is traded at a stock exchange, it means that somebody gives money into the company. And someone who's only also giving other assets than money, like managerial help and consulting issues. So shareholder is a very important part of a company which is founded, because it is one of the key driver of the company. So shareholders are the first people or organizations who are actually going into a company. And of course, as we have seen, to create value for this investor is when he is going to spend money into it in the early stages, bootstrapping, cash flow comes into the company or from the business angels, etc. And this is the important piece of describing the stages. It's of course, how do I actually spend and where do I spend the money? Yeah. And to prepare the product and the entrepreneur of the new company for the future, the company needs to increase their value. And it needs to create the value because to be open for other investors and the next generation of investors when they become more mature. And of course, to attract more consumers, etc., to go into the company and buy the products, because mostly you want to make business with winners. You don't want to do business with losers. I mean, it sounds very hard, but at the end of the game, you like products which are successful, which are sexy, which have a certain speciality in the market, and you see that certain people are going to buy this product. Do you think it's true?
Although I don't think it can be one part of the truth, but the market is real.
But please, Aysen, I didn't understand.
Well, the market is real. The winners and the losers always. I don't hear a theory about the winners group and the losers group.
Yes, but generally, I think you go into the winners and losers.
Yes.
So you try to get the winners, and therefore, it's not only the case that you have a good product, you are in the press and say, yes, I have a good product which is ready for the future. For example, in Germany, actually, venture capital is going into everything which has to do with, and that's a long time ago. It started in environmental technologies. And a lot of investments, of course, go into everything which has to do with electronic or with electrification of cars, etc., little flying stuff who is going as a taxi in the future. So there's a lot of stuff going into these kind of transportation of electric stuff, environmental. So sometimes the products are not very sexy, but because of the investors, they become more and more important. But everybody, of course, looks, how is this going to be reality? Yeah. But people look at it, interesting investors, products, but they must deliver. But the products are sexy, very good products coming up. Yeah. So probably they are the winners, hopefully. Okay, who can explain this little chart? What is on the left side?
Assets.
What are the assets?
Bank account.
Yeah.
Cash.
Yeah. Machineries, ground plots, buildings, etc. So everything which is which is seen as an asset, in a way, being accountable, or which has a certain value. Yeah. So that means having something where you can actually define a value of it. That's an asset. And on the right side, we have the liabilities, which are, of course, first of all, the equity. That means the equity of the owner. Yeah. And then the liabilities, which is everything who has to spend to third parties. So the right side is how to finance the asset side. And then in the yellow case, or in the yellow area, you have seen with the balance sheet, assets and liabilities are valued at book value according to local GAAP. What is GAAP?
Generally accepted accounting principle.
Yes. General accounting principles. So that is actually, these are the rules. Every country defines how to actually book assets and other costs, etc., into a balance sheet. How do they value the assets? What are the rules about pending assets, pending bills, etc.? So in Germany, it's called HGB, which are the defines the most important principles. And international wise, we talk about the IFRS. This is a more international standard, which is not a country-specific accounting standard. Then you have Swiss GAAP for Switzerland. You have US GAAP for USA. What is the GAAP in Chinese called? In China?
We don't use GAAP. We have the Chinese rules.
Yeah, but you have a GAAP is a general word for accounting standards. But what is the GAAP you use in China internally? How do you call this?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because we learn in the accounting course, we use the Chinese rules. We never talk about the GAAP.
Yeah. You have a local GAAP.
Maybe it's just called China GAAP.
Or it's probably only.
GAAP.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. So when you have defined all your local gaps, what did you need is to find a base gap interpretation, which allows you international wise to compare a Chinese company value and the Chinese company result of their operations with a German company or a UK company, etc. So that was the reason they introduced years ago the IFRS, which is the international framework, etc. And the IFRS is more or less a general GAAP which is able or which enables you to compare companies. So every government has this, let's say, you have Chinese GAAP, but it's hard to compare your company in China with a company in US. So that means they agree on an international framework, and then it's possible, more or less, to compare. So that means this here is very important also for startup companies, of course, because you need to compare yourself with other international companies. So, but this you should have made in your financial management environment to have a look at. So this is fair value. This is also a word from IFRS. We talk about market value, fair value. So here we say we have the equity and we have the liability. And then we used historical data, but historical data are not representing the today's value of a product or of an asset. So what we do today is that we constantly account the assets. So if the value, the market value of an asset is changing, for example, you have a building on your ground, then normally in older times, this building was valued every year once. Yeah. But what do you do in between? So that means today in IFRS, etc., you value the company, you value the company or the different assets constantly, depending on the changes in values during the period. That is very important. So you do a re-evaluation of a large number of balance sheet items. So it means you have to deal with a lot of information. Yeah. So we talk this a fair value. Important. Everybody wants to know what is the value of the company, not only on the 31st of 2020, what is the value of the company next week? Do you remember this from your financial management lectures? Are you still with me? Okay. Who can explain this one? Ray, please, go ahead to explain this slide. When we talk about a shareholder value concept, it is not only given, or the value is not only defined by the current situation of the company economically, regarding revenue, profits, etc., which are profits are seen as a result of a profit and loss evaluation. You also have to look into the future. And you know, if you see at the stock exchanges, the value of a company at the stock exchange is not only defined by the current situation. The stock exchange always look into the future and say, okay, because this is a very interesting company, the stock price is higher than the actual value of the company. Probably at the same level. But this is critical. If you have a stock price which is only representing the assets of the company, that's a very bad evaluation. because it tells I don't give as an investor any future to this company. And that is the best situation if the stakes, prices of all stakes is equal with the current asset situation of a company. That is a typical situation when for what happened it's a perfect situation that other companies buy this company for an acquisition. This is a very critical situation for a company to get bought by others. Yeah. So what we do here is we define the company value not only by the current stage. We discount, for example, future cash flows into the value definition of a company. So we say, hey, what is happening in the future? And discount it on today's value. So who can explain this mechanism? Discount value of future cash flows, future revenues, etc. Liang, how about you? When you talk about a company value, and if did you see the slide? Now, if you talk about a company value, you have a company value of today. But if you go to a stock exchange, the share price also contains the future value, the expected future value of a company. So here it says you need to talk about the future value, also the discount value of all future cash flows, etc. What does this mean and how does it work? Not really. Who can give me an answer on this?
I don't have an example. After Apple launched the iPhone 12, the stock of Apple going down, right? That's discount value.
That you mean the Apple stock went down?
Yeah, went down.
Yes. The principle is the same, but it is a negative discount.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So normally, hopefully, you have a positive discount. That means you expect a certain value of the cash flow. So what you do is based on historical experience, based on experience within a certain industry, etc., and the valuation of the company. Let's say Apple, in a positive way, and 12 is coming, then you value all the future income and cash which will actually come into Apple in, let's say, a year, or in 15 months, or in 24 months. Most or often, these kind of calculations are done up to 3 years from now. So what they say is Apple is doing until June 2021 has a cash flow of this and this money, because they made research about the buying process. They made research about competition. They made research about the buyers and different geographical developments. They say, okay, they do until next April 21, they do 2 billion in revenue. What they do is then, because it doesn't mean anything, they discount it. So they say value is of this 2 billion next year, it's 2 billion. What is this 2 billion today? Yeah. And that means you have to have an idea about what is 3 billion value today. So the other day around, you have a BMW Model 3, and today it's 10,000 euro. And the question is, what is the value of this BMW next year in June? Because you want to sell it in June. Huh? So you say next year in June, the value of my company is 15,000, of my BMW is 15,000 euro. Because you say, there will be not so much or so many BMWs on the market, because it's an older model, and it's a model which are seen as a probably as an investment. So if you say next year in June 15,000, so the question is, what is today's value? Yeah. So what is actually influencing the value of your car?
Time. And the market.
Please?
The time and the market.
The time, the interest rate. Yeah, because normally you would have an interest rate, and you have to actually count this interest rate into that value. So you have a few parameters which enables you to be able, the value you expect next year for your car, to account back to today. Let's say, as an example, 50,000 in June next year. And if you have certain calculations, there are formulas for this, you have a value of this car of 13,500 today. That means if you see next year, June, you would be able to to sell it today for 13,500, which would equivalent to the value next year. And there are formulas you can actually use to calculate this. And that is what these guys do. And then they value it, the future values for today. And that is part of the stakeholders' evaluation, a shareholders' valuation. And we will see afterwards the subjects customer value management and customer lifetime management, because part of this future cash flow discounting on today's value are very important pieces of the lifetime value of customers. Because of the end of the game, you have to look at customer targets, target groups, geographical groups, etc., to do this calculation. Because this is done by sometimes experiences from the past, and this is done by market market research. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah? Does everybody understand? Yeah. So future earnings discount to today's value. But we come back to this. Okay, shareholder value. The concept in details. Increasing of cash flows, that should be the value creation concept. So the shareholders, they need to generate, or then they expect, let's say this, they expect dividends, they expect an increase of share price, and of course, not of course, but they expect share buybacks from the company. What is a share buyback? Share buyback. A share buyback is what nearly every company is doing to support their stock price. So they buy back their own shares.
Especially in America.
Yeah. They do it because, first of all, they want to stabilize the stock price. And if they're afraid for a takeover from another company, they try to buy back their shares. The distribution or liquidation proceeds to owners when company terminates. Yeah, of course. Everybody wants to get as much money as possible when the company is terminated. So, Ray, can you explain this slide? Ray, who wants to explain this slide? I think Ray's in the restroom. Hello, Liang. This is what we talked about, that the shareholder value is not only accounted by the today's value of assets. It takes into account also the future income, future revenue, and future profits. When you have the shareholder value concept. So what is, okay, this is, I mean, that is a result of actually future values. And that, of course, means also that the value of the stock should at least be the same in future cash flows as an investment in a bond. You expect a dividend be higher as an interest of a normal bond. Yeah. So and then you have the minus, the cons. Xiao, what is the con side of the shareholder value concept? What are the critical parts of it? What are the problems of this shareholder value concept? So we said a major part is to predict the future revenue, profit, income of of this shareholder value. And you look into the future and discount it today, as today, this projection is risky and it gives a certain uncertainty of this. Yeah. So the revenue is to 12,000 iPhones. But it is difficult actually to tell what is revenue from iPhones a year. This gives a certain uncertainty to evaluate the stakeholders' value. That means the shareholder value. That means, is the price of 50 euro for a stock a real price, including the real and right numbers for the future expected revenues? This is difficult to actually project. Terminal value, it's the same. Payments, interest of other stakeholders or non-financial interests are disregarded.
Which means some of the value are missing.
Please?
Which means some of the value are missing, right?
Yeah. So this is not a stakeholder, a shareholder. It is a shareholder issue, but here you have a stakeholder issue. Mm-hmm. That is, these are the guys we talked about, the non-financial people. They have interests in this company because often they finance these companies, they have stocks of these companies, and they have their own investments. So this is a danger for every investors in a company. What do the others do? Okay, so now we come from the shareholder to the stakeholder. So as we said, the stakeholders are the guys or the organization which have an interest in the company, to know about the company, to look at this company, but they are not invested in the company. We have a more or less picture here, as are the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders talked about today are the owners, the employees, the unions, being able to represent the employees, and the managers, of course, who influence most parts of the company. And the external stakeholders who are looking at us, of course, are the suppliers, of course, the customers. They look, of course, what do they do? What does this company do? And what are for companies, environments, societies, which are more or less new factors? They look at the company, new factors which are not relevant, which were not relevant years ago, but become very important, that stakeholders looked at companies, how they do things, how they produce, how they behave. what changed compared to the history? What are customers look at in today's companies? More and more. Probably it's different in China. So it's probably a part of a system or a company management. So in Europe or in the US, customers look very much, how does a company behave? How does a company produce their products? Do they produce the products by protecting environmental issues? Do they use ground energies? Do they use solar panels? Whatever. Do they have a balanced use of energy? That means, what do they need in energy, and how did they actually spend? How did they generate energy? Do they destroy rivers, etc., with their production? All these behaviors, all these activities are now important. An example, also how a company does their, let's say, marketing, or they little marketing movies and little spots in TV, etc. So Volkswagen did one spot in the US where they were not joking, but they generated a certain atmosphere with black people in a TV spot.
Yes. All must have people.
Yeah.
All the films.
It was like a big shitstorm again. A big shitstorm in Germany with Amazon. It was a huge shitstorm against policy of from Amazon. And in today's social networks, it is very critical for a company actually to go certain negative ways, behaviors. The social networks are directly aware about what happened. Probably change the product. Don't buy at change the product, change companies. Don't do businesses with these companies anymore. So these things, how they behave, how they go with energy, how they go with environmental, etc. All these things became very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if today's companies in the automotive, if they don't have any products or future positive view on their environmental behavior, they will have a hard a hard place, a hard game in the future, or the chemical industry, etc. So we and the stakeholders expect that they have a complete different understanding of production behavior, social behavior, economical behavior than years ago, and 20 years ago.
Yes.
There is a lot of research made about what this means.
It seems the situation in China is totally different.
Yeah. Also, of course, because more and more companies come to market, more and more products are available in the market. So it's often not very complicated as a consumer to change a product. Okay, this is very important. This side becomes more and more important, because when this here doesn't work properly and the company is not having good relationships to the stakeholders, it can have significant influence to the shareholders who owns the company.
I still want to say that I'm afraid in China, people care more about the result rather than the process. So we got a energy efficiency rating. Of course, for the electrical products, like any machines, air conditioning, something like that, we do have a energy rating, efficiency rating, level 1 to level 5.
Okay, and this is then given by companies or also
by products. Products is different.
That if you buy products have kind of a rate,
it will have a marker. For example, if you buy air conditioning or buy a fridge, it will have a marker on that. Level 1 is very good. Level 5 is efficient loss.
Okay, very good.
That's how we doing our part of protect the environment and save more energy.
Yeah. With us, it's not on the product. We mostly have that the production is seen as energy neutral, like this, but not on the. It's a good idea to actually have this marked on the product. It's easier for the consumer. It's very good. So the value concept that takes all interest is called stakeholder value, or all stakeholder values. So we have a shareholder value, and we have a stakeholder value. And you see here, reduction of pollution is a value creator. Not reducing number of employees is a value creator. Not cutting costs by reducing quality can be value creation to customer. So this is more and more getting more and more important, because stakeholders have more power to influence companies than before. Like I said about the social medias, it's very, very easy to influence companies. Okay. This is German. Who can read this? Ray.
We cannot read this.
Of course you can read this.
Sorry, I need translation.
Okay. Merkmale eines Startups. Jünger als 10 Jahre, Umsatzwachstum größer als 20% pro Jahr und oder innovatives Geschäftsmodell. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled, whatever. Okay, this means here the major factors, or I think, how would you translate in Chinese?
I would generally speaking that company or factories, new company or new startup factories, maybe.
So this is kind of what are the major part of a definition of a startup. As you see, the startup mostly say a definition of a startup means, for example, it is younger than 10 years. So if you have a company, I would say younger as 5 years. If you have a company which is 8 years old or 10 years old, I wouldn't call them startup. I would say they didn't start up. Either they grew up to a company, or they are still in a startup environment and don't grow, and more or less are not specific in a way of a startup. So they are just doing business on a certain level. Another part of a definition is if you call it startup, it should have revenue growth bigger or more than 20% a year. So it should have a significant revenue growth. And or it should have, to be a startup or to be named as a startup, should have an innovated business model. If you present yourself just copying an idea or a product, I don't know whether you can name this startup. So I think you need to have a certain understanding about what is a startup. Not everything which is on the market you can call startup. Must be different. If somebody has a standard products copying here and copying there and whatever, and they tell you I'm a startup, and then you have to say, okay, what is your growth, your revenue growth? What is the innovation in your product, in your business model? And you cannot name anything as a startup. It's just to define a company. You do say on the corner, but if you do something very special with it, it's probably another thing to look at it as a startup. Yeah. Okay, I would say let's have a break. 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
The girls. Okay, so see you in 15 minutes.